Hello class, once again. This is your second flipped video with Mr. Molinaro. I'm a little excited, maybe too much. But we're going to continue with the Gilded Age again today. And as you can see right here on the screen, 4 presidents worth noting in the Gilded Age. Now, there are more than 4 between 1877 and 1900, but I just want to focus on 4 right now, and we'll get to the other guys later. Alright, so let's begin with President Rutherford B. Hayes. So he was president from 1877 to 1881. He was a Republican, and that is worth noting. Republican. The years, guys, I'm not too big on, but knowing that he's a Republican or not for this particular topic is good. So why study Rutherford B. Hayes? What did he do for us or for America in the Gilded Age? Well, as we talked about yesterday, and what we should have reviewed during the discussion where I paused the video a couple minutes ago, is that Rutherford B. Hayes fought the spoil system. And again, just as a recap, the spoil system was when politicians were elected to office and then basically hired their buddies to be in office with them, all right? Not a cool scenario. So basically, because he started fighting this spoil system, he initiated civil reform, and basically what that means is just reforming public jobs, all right, more or less. So initiated civil reform just means that he's, reforming the public sector or government jobs, all right. It is also key to note that he tried to regulate business. Specifically, he tried to regulate the railroads because, quite frankly, railroads were becoming a monopoly in itself. And again, we talked about that yesterday. So let's just focus for a second what was happening with the railroads. So these companies would actually give special rates to certain people. Who do you think these certain people were? People with a lot of money. So if they were transporting a lot of goods, they would give them a discounted price. Likewise, all right, if you were just a regular average Joe citizen farmer, and you weren't transporting as much, you would get charged more. So obviously, this was seen as a monopoly on the system, something that someone needed to regulate, specifically the federal government. So Rutherford B. Hayes tried to pass it through Congress, and ultimately failed during his reign as president. All right, it will be combated again later on, but for right now, what you need to know is our buddy over here, Rutherford B. Hayes, was not successful at regulating railroads. All right, so let's continue on to our next president. Our next president, not to be confused with the cat, James A. Garfield. He was only president for a couple months. You know why? He got shot. You know by who? One of his friends. That's right, one of his friends. So he also was a Republican. So we have 2 Republicans back to back. All right, and he was fighting against the spoil system. Now, ironically, this is why he got assassinated. He was assassinated by a friend, all right, because Garfield would not appoint him into one of his positions. So Garfield gained presidency, but wasn't going to give his friend a spot with him. All right, his friend got a little upset and pop, assassinated him. All right, so obviously in a couple months you can't really do much, but he did fight against the spoiled system in that very limited time he was president. So let's continue on to somebody who's probably been in office a little longer than a couple months. Now here we have Chester A. Arthur. He was president from 81 to 85. He was another Republican. So we have 3 Republicans back to back. He was the one who actually got rid of, or as I like to say, defeated the spoil system. All right, so he got rid of the spoil system. And really what helped him out in getting rid of this, let's hire my friends system, is due to Garfield's assassination. Because again, Garfield was assassinated by one of his friends. So what he ended up doing, Chester A. Arthur, he created something called the Pendleton Civil Service Act. That should sound very familiar. Why should it sound very familiar? Because we went over it last video. Just in case you forgot what that is, it's basically that now instead of the spoil system, right, where politicians hired their friends, individuals were appointed to government jobs based on merit or experience, all right? and that was put in place by the Pendleton Civil Service Act. So, little rewind, little recap. All right, spoils system out, Pendleton Civil Service Act in. Let's move on. All right, so our last president who we're going to tackle, he actually had 2 terms. There's one president in between his 2 terms. I'm not going to mention him. And then there's a president after. I'm not going to mention right now. All right? But as you can see, Grover Cleveland had 2 terms. He was a Democrat. So the first 3 presidents that we discussed today were all Republicans. So he was a Democrat. This was a little shift, all right, in government parties, all right? And this is the reason why. Republicans weren't doing enough to regulate business. So Grover Cleveland came in, bam, on fire, and he supported government regulation of business, such as regulating the railroads and regulating other monopolies, all right? But that's just one example. So he wanted to regulate business. Republicans weren't doing enough, so we had to have a Democrat step in. So he also combated political corruption, very similar to the Republicans, right? They got rid of the spoils system. Well, Grover Cleveland took it one step further and tried to oust or get rid of other people that were corrupt within the federal government and local branches of government. He also wanted to lower tariffs. Now, maybe we have to discuss this a little bit further than the bullet points on there. What a tariff is a good coming into a country would basically have a tax on it. So what Grover Cleveland wanted to do was lower these tariffs or lower these taxes on incoming goods to allow essentially more foreign goods to flood the market. All right, so it would be cheaper for people like us, the consumers, to buy products. Well, what happened is he wasn't protecting domestic, or he wasn't protecting U.S. goods. So basically what happened was businesses within the United States were starting to lose profits. Guess what? When you lose profits, you can't hire people. When you can't hire or pay people, then you fire people. What happened was the worst depression yet in American history. Now we all know the Great Depression, the 1930s, great, but that's not there yet. All right. So Grover Cleveland, although he tried to help, all right, he tried to combat political corruption. All right, he tried to lower tariffs to increase goods for goods to be cheaper for the average Joe citizen consumer. But in the end, he created a huge depression, which obviously is a huge problem. I just want to recap what we just learned about these presidents within the Gilded Age. All right, so let's conclude. There were 3 Republican presidents which fought against the spoils system. All right, so they finally, with Chester Arthur, defeated the spoils system, but they really did nothing to successfully regulate business, right? We had Rutherford B. Hayes attempt to regulate the railroads when he was in office, but he failed. He failed. Then we had Grover Cleveland come in after our 3 Republican presidents, and his main goal was to regulate business and fight political corruption. As a side note here, and this might make more sense now, he fought political corruption. He had to spend money to investigate to see who was corrupt. So he was spending government money to get rid of political corruption, right? And once again, he was regulating businesses. He was putting, stricter rules on businesses. So what he did was he ended up creating the worst depression ever. All right? Not good. Not good. And what I said about 30 seconds to a minute ago was that it created high rates of unemployment. In fact, 18% within America, the highest that they've ever seen. So this is what happened. There's a guy, Jacob S. Coxey. He was from Ohio. He was actually a very wealthy man. After being unemployed for several years and not being able to land a job, him and about 5,000 to 10,000 other people demanded that the government create jobs for the unemployed. So what he did was, because the government wasn't doing anything for average Joe citizen, if you will, he led a march on Washington in 1894. Now, what happened was, from 5,000 to 10,000 people dwindled down to 2,000 people because they had to hop on the railroads and the government was restricting their access to getting on these railroads. So they marched onto Washington, and unfortunately tried to assemble there, which is under their amendment rights. Failed to do so, and Coxey got arrested, and the army was dispersed, unfortunately.